Dr. Scott Kaufman, history chair, Francis Marion University, is with us. You and I would agree that education is essential.
Absolutely.
We would agree that the improvements of education have a positive impact on a community.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just not of the opinion, and I want to get your opinion, I'm not of the opinion that money's the problem. Because when I look at a 50-year window of time, and I see the amount of money and the increase of spending and the increase of personnel and the testing scores, the science, the math, the reading scores have remained fairly stagnant over the past 50 years. You would say what to that argument? Not an argument, but that commentary.
I think that, and there's a number of things we can look into why this is the case. But I think that that you do have to look at money playing a role in this. I don't know if you've seen the Center for Education, Recruitment, Retention, and Advancement report that's been coming out over the past few years about the shortage in teachers in this state. And in fact, it's a national phenomenon. And there are a variety of reasons for it. But one of the things that is vitally important is that we fill these holes that are existing. We need these teachers. And one of the things that can attract teachers, well, there are a number of things that can attract good teachers. I mean, obviously, salary is important. Correct. But facilities, I think, are also important in bringing good teachers to places. And that can help in terms of improving test scores, among other things. And I would like to see, I mean, I deal with students at the college level. And I have students who I freely admit come to my classes who need assistance. And I think if efforts can be made at the lower levels, the K through 12 levels, to help them in that process, so that when they get to the college level, they are not struggling so much, then that is beneficial overall, because you end up with individuals who not only do well in their classes, but then are in a position to do well in the real world and to provide the skills that are necessary for the jobs that are going to be asked of them in the 21st century.
Scott, having said that, you and I agree, and I'm not patting you on the back here, but I have enormous respect for teachers, and I want teachers to be well compensated, but I want those to be the good teachers. You know, I want the good teachers to be well compensated. It seems to me, and correct me if I'm wrong, it seems to me that there's a tendency in public sector entities, whether it's education, whether it's, you know, public works, whether it's what, that we paint with a very broad brush. The private sector rewards productivity in a way proportional to the business owner's belief that this person is this important to the organization. Would it be more fair to better compensate teachers that we deem to be really, really good teachers and figure out a way to get rid of those teachers who just aren't very good at the job?
A merit system, I think, is very important. But at the same time...
Do you agree that we don't have a merit system? That teaching is not based on merit, accomplishment, and how good you are at the job?
I think merit makes a significant portion of what we have.
Okay.
And we have to keep in mind that when you are a teacher, if you've been a teacher for 1 year, 5 years, 10 years, you're always going to be looked at by accrediting agencies, by your peers, and so there's always going to be the pressure on you to look at what are the new methods of teaching, what are the new pedagogies, what are the new technologies that are out there.
You can't say we're like pedagogies on the show. I mean, you got to...
Well, method of teaching.
That's better. That's much better.
Yeah, and even at the college level, I mean, even if you have tenure, there is something called post-tenure review, where even if you have tenure, you can still be looked at and see, are you doing what is expected of you so that your students succeed, that they do well. So I think merit is part of the system throughout, no matter how long you've been teaching.
Okay, is it fair to say that I make an argument, and I want to get your take on this, and this is where I get in trouble when I say things like this, but when we talk about teaching, Scott, there is and I want to be careful. I wasn't careful the other day, and I got some pushback a little bit. There was a day, and I'm talking about, I'm going to sound racist, but I'm going to sound sexist. I certainly don't intend to sound that way. But was there a day that in opportunities of employment, women considered teachers to be the top rung on the ladder? In other words, 30 or 40 or 50 years ago, the brightest and most accomplished females didn't consider whether or not they could run Hewlett-Packard. I'm thinking about Carly Fiorina, or whether they could run, I think the CEO of Facebook is a female, Sheryl Sandberg, if I'm not mistaken. But 40 years ago, that was kind of off limits to females. You didn't dream about running Facebook. You didn't dream about, managing or being CEO of Hewlett-Packard. The top rung on the ladder was being a school teacher. And now that very competent, accomplished, motivated, aspirational women say, no, teaching's not the profession I want to get in because it doesn't compensate me the way I need to be compensated to live the kind of life I want to lead. I want to be a CEO of a company. In other words, what women consider now, they couldn't have considered 30 or 40, 50 years ago, and it's changed the model of the pool of people who consider themselves candidates to be educators.
I would push back on what you're saying there.
But you understand what I'm saying.
I see what you're saying, but I think of a video that I show in my class. There's a wonderful series called Making Sense of the 60s. And the first, Making Sense of the 60s. The first episode's called Seeds of the 60s and the 1950s. And one woman talks about how when she graduated college, she had only 4 choices for jobs: teacher, stewardess, secretary, nurse. That was it.
And that's kind of what I'm talking about.
Yeah, but there's a difference between having an aspiration to do something and having that road open to you, and having an aspiration to do something and having that road closed. And what she's saying is that road was closed. It's the reason why when Betty Friedan published her book, The Feminine Mystique, in 1963, that so many women said, you know what? I've always been told I'm supposed to be happy being a housewife and mother. I'm supposed to be happy not having aspirations to be something more than that. And yet I don't feel that way. Once that book came out and many women realized many of us feel this way, then there was this shift that began to take place with women saying, I want to be more than simply a teacher, steward, a secretary, or nurse. And so those roads do begin to open up for women. But there still is, women still say today, there still is that glass ceiling. There still is that difficulty getting those higher level positions.
Okay, Charles Barkley argues that it's never about the money. It's always about how much money. So, you're an educator. If you were to put together a plan that would entice inspirational, motivated, competent men and women to become educators, what would that plan look like? It's easy for me from a distance to say, well, teachers need to do this, and teachers need to do that, and teachers need to work harder at this, and teachers don't work hard enough at that. You're an educator. I respect you. You know I do. But if you were king of the world for a day, and somebody said, okay, here's how you entice and recruit competent, capable, and I keep going back to the word inspirational, because I think young people need to be inspired to learn, and they need to be, teachers need to be inspirational in articulating that these are the reasons education matters, and this is how it prepares you for a more beneficial existence from here to the finish line. You would do what? What would be the 2 or 3 or 4 things that you would focus on?
Salary, of course, is going to be important. I'm looking at teachers who are familiar with the newest methods of teaching, who are able to reach out to students and understand where the students are coming from. We're looking at now a generation of students, I think they're called Generation Z, who are unlike the millennials and who have different expectations, who taught a different way. Are those teachers individuals who understand those changes that are occurring and willing to make any kind of changes to the way they teach so that they can reach to those students? I think facilities are important. If I'm a teacher who's going to a facility where it is completely run down, where all I have is a blackboard as opposed to the latest technologies to be able to provide for the students, that may be a reason for me not to come to that school district. So there are a variety. I've given you about 3 things there that I would certainly be looking at.
But here's the dilemma. Here's the crux of the argument. Everything you said requires money.
Absolutely.
Whether you compensate, whether you buy computers, whether you build new buildings or improve the ones you have. But when is the public, certainly you understand the public saying, whoa, you're charging me this for this. You're charging me this much tax on my car, this much tax on my house, this much tax when I travel, this much tax when I make a purchase at Target. Every time I turn around, I'm getting taxed. You understand that part of it. So how do we, and this is where you and I probably disagree more than we normally would. How do we settle that score when you're saying that the problem in education is we don't pay teachers enough, we got to have better computers and nicer buildings, and the taxpayer, the business guy's going, man, I can't pay anymore. You're killing me now. How do we work through together that quandary?
Well, look, you're a business person. Don't you want the best workers?
Sure I do.
And there are going to be a variety of things you're going to do to I assume, to incentivize workers. Pay is going to be an important thing you'll do to incentivize a worker. Pension plans will play a big role in that. I mean, what kind of benefit package are those workers going to be getting? That all requires money as well. And I think what we have to do for those people who are on the business sector and those who don't is to get together and look at this and say, okay, here are the dollars and cents. You have dollars and cents you look at. We have dollars and cents we look at. Let's look at how those dollars and cents are used, but also let's think about how we can work together. For instance, you're a business person. You want the best workers you can get. You want, especially if you own a business where you need to have top-notch skilled workers. Education is going to be vitally important in that. What can we do in education to be able to provide those workers for you? And let us tell you what we need to be able to do that.
Okay, let's go here, because I think this is where, and I don't disagree with anything you said. I mean, we'll probably disagree on the way to get there. But here's what I have to wake up to every day, and that's competition. I mean, it's the marketplace. I mean, there's somebody always trying to make a better widget, trying to lure an employee from my business to another business, or me trying to lure an employee from their business to mine. We're in a consistent and constant competition, and it's heated, and it's tough, and it's aggressive, and it's sometimes unfair. Somebody like me in the private sector looks at somebody like you in the public sector and says, those guys need a heavy dose of competition. In other words, vouchers, tax credits, charter schools. Let's introduce competition and create a marketplace of ideas. What do you say to that?
But there is competition.
How?
Well, for instance, if I'm a student, I'm looking into university.
Okay, I agree with that. Higher education is a definite competition.
But even at a public level, if there are, for instance, homeschooling versus coming to public school, what can I do to encourage students to come to a public school? What can I do to show that those students get the best education possible in that public school? That's one of the things. Our private, how can I get students to come to a public school as opposed to a private school?
Okay, I'm going to stop you there. Do you support or not vouchers? Because vouchers would be the biggest step toward a competitive marketplace in public education.
If we're talking about vouchers that would allow students to go to charter schools, is that what you're getting at?
Correct.
I have some concerns there because charter schools oftentimes have less accountability than the public schools do.
But they're performing better. When you look at academic achievement, they're performing, by and large. You can find examples that they're not, but by and large, when you look at the total test results and scores of charter school students prepared as compared to traditional K through 12, they outperform.
The studies I have seen suggest that they don't perform any better than the public schools do. But more than that, I am concerned about the accountability issue. What happens if those charter schools are not performing as well? What kind of accountability do they have? Public schools are accountable to the districts, to the voters, to the individuals in those localities and states. Charter schools, I'm not so sure we see that same level of accountability, and that concerns me.
Okay, last question on this issue, then I want to get to the Democrat primary. Last question on this issue. Do you believe that the government should tell a parent where to send their child to school?
I think that has been an important part of American history. I think that promoting diversity is an important thing, and I still see benefit to that.
So despite the school being called, and I got air quotes here, a failing school, and you living in that particular district, you think the government should compel against that parent's will because that parent doesn't have financial resources to make other decisions. Private school, you were talking about that a second ago. You're okay with the federal government dictating where that parent has to send that child to school?
Keep in mind that you're talking about, for instance, the Charlotte case that came out in the 1970s, which I believe has been since been overturned. So there are limits to what the federal government can do there. I am saying that I think that diversity is a very good thing. And if we need those kind of efforts to promote diversity, to promote ability to get education, then I support that idea. But I would also point out when you talk about failing schools, that too comes back to the issue of money. If we look at, for instance, I mean, there's a reason why we live in an area that's been referred to as the corridor of shame. Not getting enough funding for our schools in this part of the state. Money is a key factor in a lot of that. What are some of the things that can be done to help those failing schools? And I think it has to start with money.
And we just disagree there. I mean, we just fundamentally disagree on that central argument.